Good morning, everyone. I'm Jagrup Brar, the Minister of Mining and Critical Minerals, and I will be your MC for today's announcement. To start, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh First Nation people. We honor, recognize, and respect these indigenous peoples and their traditional stewards of the lands that we share today. I'm joined here by my friend Premier David Eby, Paul Tabori, the CEO of Centerra Gold. We have Karina Barino here, my friend somewhere out there, Executive External Affairs, Centerra Gold, and Eric Dell, Operations, Centerra Gold. And today feel really important because it comes at a moment when mining in British Columbia is moving in the right direction. Over the past year, we have seen a real momentum across the sector. Am I losing page here, or this is yours, Premier? That one too. Yeah. The project are advancing, coordination across government has improved. Partnership with First Nation are strong, and confidence in BC as a place to invest and operate responsibly continue to grow. We have seen that progress in very real ways. The Highland Valley Copper, as we all know, the biggest mine, we have copper mine in the country. Expansion continued to move ahead, and the full restart of Quinton Mine supporting long-term jobs, particularly in the small community where 30% of the population is employed by this mine, and production in the interior at the same time. And we have also fully permitted the Caribou Gold Mine that should be in construction soon. Long-standing operator like Teck continue to anchor economic activities across the province. And at the national level, the inclusion of the Red Chris expansion on the federal priority project list sent a very clear message about the importance of British Columbia's critical mineral sector in northern communities. Mining remains foundational part of the economy of this province. It supports more than 40,000 good family-supporting jobs, many of them in northern communities and in First Nation indigenous communities. And the copper and other critical minerals produced here matter more than ever as the demand grows for clean technology and electrification. This brings us to today. Today's announcement, my friend, is a significant milestone in the mining sector in this province, and particularly for the northern British Columbia. It reflects a year of work, early engagement, and a coordinated permitting approach, which we use now to expedite the projects that maintains strong environmental and safety standards while providing certainty for workers and communities. And I'm very pleased, my friends, to welcome the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, to tell you more. Premier Eby.
Thanks, man. Thanks very much to Group, and thank you to you and your team for all your work on mining in British Columbia. It is a very exciting time for the sector in our province. I see in the crowd some colleagues of mine. I see Minister Brittany Anderson, fresh off meetings with 46 local governments in just 7 days. Minister Tamara Davidson is here as well, our Minister of the Environment, and Minister Ravi Parmar, our Minister of Forests, who did some work with the federal government in relation to the Prime Minister's trip to China recently, co-signing an MOU to support the use of BC wood in housing in that massive country. Certainly good news for the forest sector. We have had a very productive forum here in Prince George. I want to thank Prince George for welcoming us. I had a chance to sit down with Prince George local government, Chamber of Commerce, and feel very welcome here. It's a good chance for us to check in and see where things are at and find areas that we can work on together. And I want to express my appreciation to the host city here and to the organizers of the forum. This is an important time for our province. We're celebrating a lot of new agreements and movement forward in a number of natural resource sectors. We marked the MOU between BC Hydro and Solism's LNG that provides them with the stability and assurance they need to reach final investment decision this year, resulting in thousands of jobs for British Columbians and significant economic opportunity for the Nisga'a people, as well as First Nations across the North. We also had important conversations about new opportunities, one of which we'll be discussing today. And it is also an opportunity for our ministers, for our MLAs, to hear from people in the natural resources sector about what's working, what's not, and how our government can be more effective, which is what we want to be in terms of growing the economy in these challenging times. Just in the last 24 hours between the Prime Minister's speech in Davos and the President's speech in Davos, I think if there's one message for British Columbians to take away from this, it's that the collaboration, the work we're doing here in relation to natural resources is more important than ever. These are the foundational wealth generating opportunities for our province that underwrite so much more of the work that we have to do, both as a province and a country, as we work to stand on our own 2 feet in this challenging global environment. There is nowhere else I would rather be than British Columbia to face these global challenges because of the opportunities that we have to diversify markets and to rely on the wealth that has supported this province for so many generations. It is still there for us if we work together. That was very apparent to me during my recent trade mission to India, which was about 72 hours ago. In the meetings with Indian companies, they were very clear that they see significant growth for their country, averaging 8 to 10% over the coming years, and they need access to energy. They need access to metals and minerals, and they need reliable trading partners that they can count on. And that is where our huge opportunity is. The companies there were eager for details on the more than 20 mining opportunities that are proposed for our province, both to participate as equity partners to invest in these mines so that they can get built, but also to enter into offtake agreements, providing stability and jobs for the long term for many people in rural and northern British Columbia. We're making good progress as a province in this moment. We have 4 times more private sector projects on the major projects list than any other province in Canada. We will be the economic engine of the new economy that we are building here as Canadians in these challenging times. We will leverage our access to the Pacific, to the growing markets there and diversity of markets to do that. And today's and yesterday's speeches in Switzerland underline the urgency of this work. For our part as a provincial government to make this reality, we have looked from top to tail, our full permitting process, working both with industry and key stakeholders to make sure we're preserving high standards in this province, but delivering projects faster, getting approvals faster so that people can get building and delivering jobs. We piloted a concurrent permitting process with Highland Valley Copper, which is under construction right now. Started construction about 4 months ago when they got their final permits. A multi-billion-dollar project with thousands of jobs associated with it. One of the other first projects through this process was the Mount Milligan Mine Life Extension with Centerra Gold. I was thrilled that Centerra was willing to go through this new process with us. We made specific commitments to them about when we expected to hit certain gates in terms of the permitting process. And our team in the public service hit every single one of those dates, which brings me to today's announcement. I'm proud to share that we have issued final permits for Mount Milligan, clearing the path for expansion and following the Environmental Assessment Office's authorization. This means hundreds of jobs are guaranteed for families going forward for the next decade. It means hundreds of millions of dollars into the local economy, resources for the province to be able to deliver healthcare, education, and other critical services in the province. And we moved this forward quickly while preserving our high standards and expectations that we have of all of our projects in British Columbia. And those high standards we will maintain going forward. The whole process started on March 31st last year, and we were able to announce final conclusion yesterday, which means about 9 to 10 months for completion, which is remarkable given that typical permit approval times were previously about 2 years for a project like this. I'd like to thank the Environmental Assessment Office, provincial regulators who did this important work, Tamara Davidson, our minister, and her team who made sure that the conditions were in place for that office to do its independent work. I want to thank her and her team for that. And I want to congratulate Centerra Gold on this important development. And I'd love to invite Paul up to share a few words with you here today.
Thank you. Thank you all, Minister and Premier. Thank you very much for the announcement on Mount Milligan. BC is probably the most prospective area for mineral development in North America. When we get together at capital markets conferences, there's always a buzz around BC. And the questions were, say, 3-4 years ago, is BC investable? Can you get a mine permitted in British Columbia? And I'll admit there was a degree of skepticism around timelines as things stood, say, 3-4 years ago. We are here after 10 months of one of the most efficient permitting processes that I've ever been involved with in my career. And I've operated all across the world, across the United States and Canada. And what this does is two things for us as Centerra. As a first step, we have Mount Milligan Mine Life here with these permits approved to 2035. And as the Premier mentioned, hundreds of jobs, hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be invested in the local economy. Equally importantly, it sets the stage for further mine life extension beyond that. And that's work that we're going to have to do over the coming years. But Mount Milligan, the ore body itself, has the potential for decades of mine life. The other thing that it did, and this is perhaps more important, is we also have another asset in British Columbia called Kemess. It's a mine that's been on care and maintenance for a number of years. This permitting process and the success and the rapidity with which it took place gave us the confidence to release a study, which we did yesterday, on our intention to proceed with further engineering, looking to a potential reopening of the Kemess mine. This would be a mine of the similar scale of Mount Milligan, copper, gold, feeding the critical metals industry, and it also has decades of mine life potential. So we are now advancing engineering studies, and then that will lead into permitting activities to potentially reopen the Kemess mine. And should we proceed with that, that would be over $1 billion of direct capital investment through construction, and then decades of life beyond that. And I'll just conclude with one other thing. On a panel this morning, I was asked, what learnings from other jurisdictions would you recommend to British Columbia? And my answer to that was, well, I'll turn that around. I would recommend to other jurisdictions to emulate what British Columbia just did with this permit and the transparency, the clarity, and the efficiency with which it was executed. So those are my concluding comments. And thank you, Minister, very much. And thank you, Premier, for this opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Centerra. Before I hand it over to the moderator, I just want to say that I want to say Centerra, for your interest in the province of British Columbia and for particularly bringing high quality, full application to the process, because that's very important. And your exceptional work with First Nations to bring them on site, that was very important in this process. Thank you to all of you and for coming. So that brings us to close. I will hand it over back to now the moderator here, and for questions and answers for Premier.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you everyone for joining us here today at the Natural Resources Forum in Prince George. We're going to take questions from the media now, and we're going to start on the phone line and then in person. For media on the phone line, please remember to press *1 to enter the queue and to unmute yourself when you're called upon. We're going to start with Wolf Deppner from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Wolf.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, Phil, to everyone. Question regarding DRIPA. Premier, yesterday you talked about the disadvantages or the potential pitfalls of repealing DRIPA. But that statement that you gave yesterday wasn't entirely new. You've said this before in the past, that your government is looking to revise DRIPA. What has fundamentally changed? Why make that statement again when you've said in the past the very same thing before? Thank you.
One of the first lessons of politics, Wolf, is that you need to repeat yourself a number of times before the message gets out. I think that a number of questions have been raised by recent court decisions, and there's uncertainty in a number of sectors, including in the natural resource sector. about the path forward on reconciliation. It's important for every community to know where government stands on these important questions. And the message is the same whether I'm speaking to First Nations leadership, whether I'm speaking to the natural resources sector, whether I'm speaking to people in Richmond. Two parts. One is that the reconciliation work that we are doing here in British Columbia is essential and will have to be done by any government. Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada recognizes Indigenous title rights. The courts have recognized those rights in British Columbia and mandated our government, any government at the provincial level, to work with First Nations together going forward. The Declaration Act gives us the framework of how to do that in an orderly way outside of court to minimize uncertainty, to minimize the risk of court decisions going sideways and creating further uncertainty. It gives us the structure, and it's not a straightforward path. It's not an easy path. There are steps forward, there are steps back, but it is a commitment to partnership through this work between us and First Nations leadership. And it's important for British Columbians to know that. This is essential work that we have to do, that this act provides the structure for us to do that, and it reduces uncertainty. The challenge with the court decisions, of course, is that they create that uncertainty that we're trying to avoid in two areas. First, around the Declaration Act, we need to be clear this is work that we're doing government to government, our government to First Nations governments together, not the courts. The second is around private property. There was a decision out of Richmond related to Cowichan, and we want to underline for British Columbians that reconciliation cannot be done at the expense of private property owners and private business owners. Their homes and businesses are not negotiation chips in this important work that we're doing together. And so those two messages are crucial. Those three messages are crucial. We have to do this work. It's got to continue. The people who say we can't, we need to stop, would create uncertainty and chaos that would lead to job loss in this province and major projects stopping in their tracks. But secondly, that we need to ensure it's work that's done by government to government. And third, that private property cannot be part of this. It's government work. It is not the responsibility of individual homeowners in Richmond.
And Wolf, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Premier, if I understood you correctly, the amendments to DRIPA and the Interpretation Act are going to come forward this spring. But just earlier this week, the government announced that it is postponing revisions to the Heritage Conservation Act. And the cynic in me might come to the conclusion that the government has done that to avoid the optics of essentially aligning that particular legislation with DRIPA, just as DRIPA faces some questions, and not just from the Conservative opposition, but also from industry and other factors. Coincidence that your government has pulled back amendments to the Conservation Act, just as the government is getting heat on DRIPA? Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, if these are unrelated issues, they are coincidental in time, but and related in the sense that they relate to each other, in the sense that the Heritage Conservation Act is part of our commitment of the work to do under the Declaration Act, but these are separate issues. The Declaration Act changes are related to a court decision that we received. We need to clarify our original intent with the Act when it was voted for unanimously in the legislature, that this was work government to government, not nations and courts separately from the provincial government, so that this is work that we have to do together. That's one piece of work. The second is the fact that we have this Heritage Conservation Act that's not working for anybody. From the Indigenous perspective, it's failing to protect critical sites. From the development industry perspective, whether natural resources or residential housing, it takes too long. The permits are uncertain. When we tried to rebuild Lytton, we ran into huge complications around the scale of the wildfire impact and the number of permits that were required. We had to send public servants over to Lytton to help people negotiate what should have been a very straightforward process. Reform is badly needed, but it has to work. It has to work for the economy in British Columbia. It has to work for First Nations. It has to work for everybody. And it can. And that's the work that we're doing, but it's taking time. It's taking certainly more time than any of us wanted, but we have to do this work. The Act has to be reformed. We will ensure that that reform is delivered. Minister Parmar and his team are committed to make sure it works for local governments, that it works for First Nations, and that it works for those that are driving the economy here in British Columbia, because that is part of our permit reform work. That is part of what we're doing to be able to move faster while preserving our high standards.
Next, we'll head to Penny Daflos from CTV.
Morning, Premier. You touched on it earlier, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts about Mark Carney's speech in Davos and then Donald Trump's comments this morning.
Yeah, I listened to the Prime Minister's speech with a sense of relief and pride. Relief that the Prime Minister is saying what we have to say, and that he is charting a course that we have to chart. We need to align ourselves with other countries that share our priorities, that protect Canadian sovereignty and that value that, and where we value their sovereignty and support them as well. This is just, there is a significant rupture, as he described it, in the international order. And as a middle power, Canada needs to find like-minded countries to stand with. This is absolutely crucial. The pride in the sense that I believe that British Columbia is going to play a key role in what the Prime Minister is charting out here. When I was in India, it was very obvious to me that we have a huge role to play in deepening our relationship with that country. When I was in Asia, visiting Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, the same. And I know that British Columbia will play a crucial role in helping realize this vision the Prime Minister has set out for the country, which I am fully supportive of.
Penny, do you have a follow-up?
I do, yeah. I just wonder if, Trump's comments this morning were rather bellicose. I wonder if that is going to change your strategy and approach. And as to add a little bit of extra onto that question, last year you were urging British Columbians to stay home during spring break travel. I know a lot of families are kind of looking at their plans right now and finalizing things. And are you sharing that same message with them again this year?
Yeah, thanks, Penny. I don't know if people have seen it, but I looked at a graphic posted by the president with an American flag superimposed on our country. I even struggle now for the words to describe the mix of emotions. There is no question but that the Prime Minister's speech will have trade consequences in terms of our relationship with the United States. But those trade consequences are minimal compared to the larger term consequences of giving up our sovereignty as a country and not standing bravely as Canadians have for generations for this beautiful country that we live in. So I feel that there is an urgency and an essential requirement that the Prime Minister and Canadians step up in this moment, and that may involve sacrifice, and that our government will do all we can to offset that through the work that we're doing in partnership with the federal government and with other countries. I certainly urge British Columbians and all Canadians to stay home or to travel at home or to travel to other countries rather than the US. The message is being received by the United States. They are feeling it. They're feeling fewer tourists coming to their country. The refusal to purchase and sell US alcohol has been heard and is creating anxiety in the United States. And it is not meant to hurt everyday Americans. It's meant to send a message that, at least from my perspective, that as Canadians, we're going to do all we can to support other Canadians. Recognize there's essential travel people are going to do. They're going to visit relatives, all these other things. But if you have a choice of where you're going to go on vacation, I really encourage people to look somewhere else.
Next, we'll head to Aaron MacArthur from Global News.
Premier, you speak of the momentum in the resource extraction sector. I mean, much of that can be undone by the uncertainty you've also spoken of. I look at Mount Milligan as an established property, and permitting is a little more straightforward on that front. How concerned are you that new projects that are in the works will not be as straightforward? It can be undone by the uncertainty on the land base.
The natural resources sector in British Columbia has worked with First Nations for a long time. They work on Crown land. This requires partnerships with First Nations. That is not something that is new to this sector. And in fact, this is a sector that's shown leadership in that regard. The issues related to the Cowichan decision are creating anxiety, particularly, as I understand it, within private property owners, and rightly so. We have to draw a bright line. That private property is not part of this work. In terms of Crown land, and our relationship with nations and working together, you can see incredible examples of it here at this Natural Resources Forum. Indigenous-led projects, equity partnerships, full support for projects, including employment benefits, resource sharing. It is remarkable what's happening here, and I think an example to many jurisdictions around the world.
Do you have a follow-up, Aaron?
Yeah, please. Thank you. DRIPA and the amendments that you've spoken about have become incredibly divisive. Will this become an election issue? And could it be the issue that decides the next election?
Well, I think that the question of whether or not to work with First Nations may indeed be an election issue. And if it is, I think it would be important for British Columbians to understand the consequences of terminating conversations with First Nations on these important issues. The consequences, major projects that are going to create literally tens of billions of dollars of economic opportunity over the next couple of years in this province, will stop in their tracks. The nations involved will file court actions seeking injunctions based on their title rights, which are well established in court under the Canadian Constitution, Section 35. The idea that you could move faster or that you could provide jobs and employment in rural and remote British Columbia through the resources sector without partnerships with First Nations is false. It is destructive, ultimately. It is not controversial. Everybody understands it. They understand what Canadian law is. They understand what First Nations title is. The companies that are working here have a sophisticated understanding of what needs to be done, and they're doing that work. In terms of whether you talk about the largest private sector investment in Canadian history, LNG Canada Phase 2, whether you talk about Mount Milligan, which we're announcing here today, Highland Valley Copper, a multi-billion-dollar investment, Artemis Gold, a company that just put $1 billion into their mine and is now proposing to put another $1 billion in, thousands of jobs. Every single one of these projects is engaged in partnership with the local First Nations. And anyone who tells you that that doesn't need to happen, that there's another way to do it without the First Nations is lying to you. And the consequence will be chaos, unemployment, and economic contraction at a time when our country cannot afford it. We need to stand together, including in partnership with First Nations, and it's crucial. But we also need to have bright lines. We need to be very clear that this does not mean consequences for your private home, for your private business. It means opportunities for private business in this province. And that's where our government is on this issue. And if we have to fight an election on it, we will.
Next, we'll head to Rob Shaw from Czech News. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, hi, Premier. There's a gentleman in Kamloops trying to build a garden on a vacant piece of land, found 2 ancient skulls, has $100,000 in legal and archaeological costs, and an $80,000 bill from the local nation for smudging, security, and other costs. He's now got an unsellable piece of property and a sacred site declared under DRIPA and a heritage conservation branch, a series of red tape tying him up in all sorts of things. And I just wondered if you could comment on that story and the fear, maybe, from some British Columbians, if you find something in your backyard and you're digging around, you could be left with a piece of property that is unsellable and costs that you have to pay without any help from any other level of government.
Yeah, well, certainly, Rob, if you're digging around on your property and you find a couple of skulls, regardless, I think there's an expectation and understanding among British Columbians that may delay your plans. There are investigations and consequences that flow from that. The same with if you found a leaking oil tank, you found some old toxic waste. These are challenges that people run into when they're developing properties. There is no such thing as a DRIPA mandated sacred site declaration that I'm aware of. But there is an obligation, I think, as a provincial government, when an archaeological site is discovered, to ensure that we understand what it is and we're able to move forward. I think the important question here is, in terms of the costs that are associated with it, how the Heritage Conservation Act responds to that. Is it in a timely way? Is it in a way that minimizes the impact on the property owner? Those are key questions that we're actually asking around the current Heritage Conservation Act review that we're doing. It's an act that isn't working for anybody. It's not working for property developers. It's not working for First Nations. And it's not working for the natural resource sector. So that's where the opportunities are for review. I think cases like this give us the opportunity to ensure that the Act works for British Columbians and also achieves its purposes. If you're digging in your garden and you have the misfortune of uncovering an ancient Indigenous archaeological site, there are going to be consequences that flow from that. As a provincial government, though, what we can do is look at how do we help manage costs, how do we help manage those consequences to reduce the impacts on that property owner, and that we also protect the amazing heritage of this place that we live in.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
I'll just double barrel this, I guess, to follow that up then. Is it your intention to make changes so that private property owners who discover archaeological remains on their property through no fault of their own are not on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars in government-mandated costs? I guess that's the first part of it. The second, on a different topic, you've talked in the past about BC Cancer delays and trying to improve that system. There was a case today of a woman who told her story at the legislature of having delays in getting the tests she needed to determine her cancer diagnosis, and she's calling on the government to do a better job with that. Have you got any update on where we're at on cancer delays based on your past comments, and are you satisfied with where the system is there?
Thanks, Rob. We're operating under a Heritage Conservation Act that's been in the province for, 40 or 50 years. It's always operated the same way. It continues to operate the same way, and it is not a functional system for modern demands. That work is being undertaken by the Ministry of Forests to do reform. This case may be illustrative of an area where we can find improvements to support development in the province and protection of these sites. And I think that it does give us a concrete case that we can look at as that reform work is being done. Are there ways to minimize impact? But this is not something new. This is an act that has existed for generations in this province to ensure that the archaeological heritage of British Columbia is protected. With respect to cancer treatment, we've done a lot of work on cancer treatment. We have had serious challenges with cancer treatment where we had to send people to Bellingham, Washington, to ensure that they got timely treatment. We have, since that point, added hundreds of new cancer workers, from doctors to technicians in the province, opening cancer centers in multiple parts of British Columbia. There is still huge strain on the system. We have an aging population. The sophistication of cancer treatment means that treatments are more successful, but it also means that more people need treatment for longer. There's demand on the system, and we're going to continue to work to drive down those testing times, treatment times, to ensure that people get the cancer care that they need when they get that horrific diagnosis. It's what they and their families deserve. And if this woman did not receive that from our cancer system, we'll have a look at that and identify the gaps to make sure that it's addressed.
Next, we'll head to Justine Hunter from the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Justine.
Hi, thanks. Premier, you were describing your reaction to the Prime Minister's speech at Davos, and I'm wondering if you had any kind of heads up on what was coming, and more generally, how would you describe communications between the Prime Minister and yourself through these recent weeks with all the shifting landscape on both politics and trade?
Yeah, things are moving very quickly at a global scale right now. And the Prime Minister is charting out a course for the country that I support wholeheartedly, building relationships with allies that can ensure the security of Canadians and our sovereignty. And British Columbia is all in to bring our resources, our work to bear on that effort to ensure the independence of our country. And very much look forward to meeting with the Prime Minister and my colleagues from across the country in Ottawa on Tuesday. We have a number of meetings coming up, and to have further conversations. We have a very good open relationship with the Prime Minister's office. He is keeping quite a blistering global schedule, and we're trying to keep up. The work that we were doing in India was fully supported by the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office, and I note his work in China. And certainly our goal as well is to build and deepen relationships with countries around the world, and we'll continue to do that work in partnership with the PMO.
And do you have a follow-up, Justine?
I do, and I take it that you did not get a heads up on that, but maybe you can. I just want to get on with my next question, if you can answer that as well, though. There were clearly winners and losers out of the Prime Minister's trip to China. And I'm wondering how will keeping that 25% tariff on Chinese steel potentially impact some of the big projects that you have on the books here in British Columbia?
Yeah, thanks, Justine. I certainly think it's important for all of us across the country to identify ways in which we can support the efforts to build up Canada and to ensure we stand on our own 2 feet. The steel sector is an important one in Ontario. We have a significant aluminum business here in British Columbia and in Quebec. In terms of our infrastructure projects, without doubt, the tariffs, not just on China, but generally on steel coming into British Columbia, have dramatically increased costs for these projects. We're in conversation with the federal government about how to mitigate that, whether it's enabling us to be able to buy steel from Ontario and Quebec for our infrastructure projects to meet the demands. The cost of transportation makes it quite cost prohibitive for us to do that currently, or whether it's a relief from the tariff for certain infrastructure projects that are helping to build up the province and the country. We're quite open to either opportunity, but those conversations are ongoing right now.
Next, we'll head to Derek Penner from the Vancouver Sun.
Wanted to ask you, with this process that you underwent with the Mount Milligan mine, how is it going to come into play with the other projects, SK Creek, which is finished its environmental process, and the Red Chris mine, which extension, which are on your major projects list? And what do you expect the timelines for those projects to be now?
Thanks, Derek. We have piloted with both Centerra and with Anglo-Teck this concurrent permitting process where we're doing consultation, environmental assessment, and other permits concurrently rather than one after the other. When we run them together at the same time rather than waiting for one to complete before starting the next one, significant time savings have been realized through that. The Anglo-Teck Highland Valley Copper Mine Life Extension, a multi-billion-dollar addition to that site, went through about 34% faster than normal. Centerra went through about 50% faster, so we're getting better at it. And our goal is to ensure that those benefits accrue to projects that are in the process going forward. That would be Red Chris, Yellowhead, a number of other mines in the province. Jagrup, do you have anything specific about those?
So what we do with all the, particularly the Centerra project was part of the priority list Premier announced in last March. And so what we do with those projects is that we run what we call the single application combined program, where the application is given to all the concerned departments. So we run it at the same time, we review it together. So we eliminate basically the any duplication in that process. So by doing that, we have been able to reduce almost 35% of the time. And in this case, particularly Mount Milligan, this permit has been issued in 9.5 months. Usually it takes about 2 years. So without compromising any environmental standards or social standards or reconciliation process, we work together with other ministry to make sure we issue permit in a timely fashion.
And Derek, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, this one will be a bit off topic for a colleague of mine. Related to the extortion situation in the Fraser Valley, yesterday RCMP Assistant Commissioner John Brewer said that the extortion situation is not a crisis, although it is a threat to public safety. How do you respond to that assessment? Do you agree with it?
Yeah, I heard Mr. Brewer's comments. I have to admit I was a bit puzzled by them. It's hard to think of a situation where you're unable to do business, you don't feel comfortable in your own home, you're facing gunshots, and where residents in homes are shooting back at people who are shooting at their homes as anything other than a crisis. I'll speak bluntly. If Mr. Brewer does not feel that urgency, does not feel that this is a crisis, then perhaps he's not the right person to head up this task force. The reason we established this task force with the Canadian Border Services Agency, the RCMP, with local police of jurisdiction, the Surrey Police Department, was to respond to a crisis. We need them to bring that urgency to this job and to do it quickly and effectively for the people of Surrey and the people south of the Fraser. It is what they expect. It's what they demand. It's what I expect.
Next, we'll head to Katie DeRosa from the CBC. Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, Premier. This morning, there are advocates of intimate partner violence and the victims of intimate partner violence were calling on the government to do a lot more than what it is doing already. They're saying that they want mandatory risk assessments for intimate partner violence, a better link between family law and the criminal justice system so that the protection orders actually can be enforced, and increased funding for nonprofits that help victims. Will you commit to those calls?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this through the Ministry of Attorney General, and a report that outlined some important recommendations for us that sound like they overlap very closely with the recommendations of these advocates. We have done some significant reform work with Crown Counsel, but also pushing with the federal government reforms that have allowed for our province to avoid the repeat of some pretty horrific attacks on women that we have seen here in British Columbia. In particular, the issue of whether someone who is awaiting sentencing is released back into the community before they're sentenced to jail in relation to intimate partner violence. The fact that this needs to be considered separately by judges and courts as a criminal code offense where there's issues of strangulation or other warning signs of escalation that could lead to the murder of a partner. All of these reforms have been realized by recent proposals that are in front of the Parliament federally and have already been implemented by Crown Counsel here in British Columbia. I know there's more we can do, and definitely we will continue to look for opportunities, and we will work with these advocates to deliver safety for women in every corner of British Columbia.
And Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just in response to your comments about Mr. Brewer's comments, if you don't have confidence that he's the right person to head up this task force because he doesn't think it's a crisis, how can the public have that confidence?
Well, I think Mr. Brewer has the opportunity to clarify that he feels this sense of urgency. I would urge him to do so. If he doesn't feel the sense of urgency, then we do need someone else to do this. This is an urgent and serious situation for the people of Surrey, for the people south of the Fraser. And the head of the task force needs to reflect that urgency in the work. Frankly, until his comments yesterday, I thought Mr. Brewer had really demonstrated that sense of urgency and had been doing very constructive work reining this in. It's possible in this world to misspeak. Certainly, I'm well aware of that. I'm human too. The comments, though, really do cut at public confidence in the head of the task force's work. And he needs to either clarify and if he doesn't feel the urgency, then he needs to step aside.
And that concludes today's event. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here
Thanks
today.
very much.